a woman's terrifying message from the afterlife. The story of Dr. Emma Williams is one that feels almost too incredible to believe. It's the kind of tale that blurs the lines between the physical and the spiritual, challenging our understanding of life, death, and what might lie beyond. Dr. Williams was a successful, highly respected surgeon, someone grounded in the world of medical science, with no reason to fabricate such an outlandish story. Her journey from the clinical precision of medicine to a profound, otherworldly experience is what makes her account both compelling and mystifying. It all began in the late 1990s during a kayaking trip in the wild, untamed waters of South America. Dr. Williams and a group of friends were on a quest for adventure, hoping to navigate the treacherous rivers of Chile. She was an experienced kayaker, skilled and confident in her abilities. But on one fateful day, the river had other plans. While attempting to navigate a particularly dangerous stretch, her kayak became wedged beneath the water. The force of the current trapped her, pinning her beneath the rocks with no air to breathe and no way to escape. For over 20 minutes, Dr. Williams was submerged in the frigid water. Her friends, frantic and desperate, fought to free her, but the odds were slim. They had already started to accept that she was lost to them when, against all expectations, they managed to pull her lifeless body from the river. By all medical standards, she was dead. Her body was cold, unresponsive, and without a pulse. But it is at this very moment that Dr. Williams' story takes a turn into the extraordinary. According to Dr. Williams, the next moments were unlike anything she had ever experienced. Instead of darkness or nothingness, she found herself surrounded by a brilliant, radiant light. It wasn't just an illumination. It was a presence, alive with warmth, love, and a peace she couldn't fully describe. Though no words were spoken, she understood everything at once, as if the very essence of truth and understanding enveloped her. It was as though she had been bathed in a kind of universal knowing. In this place, Dr. Williams felt the presence of what she later interpreted as angels, beings of light that radiated a love and serenity unlike anything she had ever felt. There was no fear, no pain, only an overwhelming sense of safety and comfort. These beings, luminous and graceful, moved around her with a gentle, guiding energy, preparing her for something greater. She realized they were leading her toward a meeting with God. Time, as she understood it, did not exist in this space. She could see the frantic efforts of her friends below, but there was no longer any connection to her earthly body. It was as if she had transcended her human form, becoming part of something far greater. Then, the beings of light spoke to her, not with words, but with a message that was deep and clear. It was not her time yet. She had more work to do. She was told she would return to the physical world. Though the thought of leaving this place of peace and love was painful, Dr. Williams understood the necessity of her return. When she was resuscitated and brought back to life, it was nothing short of miraculous. Her friends, the paramedics, and doctors were astounded. How had she survived being underwater for so long without brain damage? The experience left her with a profound sense of gratitude for life and a certainty that she had glimpsed something beyond the veil of death. At first, Dr. Williams shared her extraordinary near-death experience only with close friends and family. But years later, she decided to write a book about her journey, Back from the Brink, which became an instant bestseller, resonating deeply with those who were curious about life after death. Yet, there was something Dr. Williams had kept secret, a part of her experience she hadn't shared with anyone, not even in her book. It was a vision, a prophetic glimpse into the future that had stayed with her, buried deep within her mind. She hadn't revealed it until much later, when the world seemed to be changing in ways she couldn't ignore. In 2016, after the unexpected election of a controversial figure, Dr. Williams felt a powerful pull to speak out. She began to share the details of the vision she had received during her time on the other side. In this vision, she found herself once again enveloped in the brilliant light, surrounded by the same loving presence of God. But this time, there was an urgency to the message, something critical that needed to be understood. She was shown a future filled with turbulence, division, and chaos. Amidst this unrest, a leader would rise, someone who was completely unexpected by the people. The images weren't entirely clear, but the feelings were unmistakable. This leader would disrupt the existing order, challenge the status quo, and bring to the surface long-hidden truths. It wasn't until after the election of Donald Trump in 2016 that Dr. Williams began to make sense of the vision she had seen. While she never explicitly named the figure in her vision, the traits and actions of the leader she had witnessed in the afterlife aligned eerily with what was unfolding in real life. She felt a deep sense of conflict. Was this message meant to be shared? She wrestled with the idea of revealing such a personal and prophetic experience, especially as it related to such a controversial political figure. But as time passed, and the events of the world seemed to echo the turmoil she had seen, Dr. Williams felt compelled to speak. She began sharing her vision in public lectures and private conversations, hoping that the message from beyond might offer some kind of clarity, or at least a glimpse of hope, for the uncertain times ahead. In the end, Dr. Williams' story is not just one of life after death, but of a mysterious spiritual insight into the turbulent path the world seemed to be heading down. Whether one believes in the mystical elements of her experience or not, there is no denying the deep impact it has had on her life and the lives of others. The terrifying message of the afterlife. A woman's vision of the future. The story of Dr. Clara Blackwood is one that defies logic and challenges everything we think we know about life, death, and the mysteries of the beyond. Dr. Blackwood, a renowned surgeon and respected figure in the medical field, had no reason to invent such an unbelievable tale. But what happened to her on a fateful day in the late 1990s has left many questioning the very nature of reality itself. It all began during an adventure-filled kayaking style to the remote rivers of Chile. Dr. Blackwood, an expert kayaker, was no stranger to the wild, unpredictable currents. But one fateful day, while navigating a particularly treacherous stretch of river, disaster struck. Her kayak became trapped beneath the violent waters, pinning her underwater. For over 20 minutes, Dr. Blackwood was submerged, struggling for air, her life slipping away. Her friends fought desperately to free her, but they knew the odds of survival were slim. When the Soralde finally managed to pull her out of the water, her body was cold and lifeless. By all medical standards, she was dead. But what happened next is where her story takes a dramatic turn. According to Dr. Blackwood, her experience in those moments of death was anything but empty darkness. Instead, she found herself bathed in an otherworldly, radiant light. It wasn't just light, it was a presence, alive with warmth, love, and a peace she had never known before. In that moment, she understood everything. There were no words spoken, yet she knew all truths, instantly and completely. Surrounded by this light, Dr. Blackwood felt a profound sense of comfort, as though she was wrapped in the embrace of something far greater than herself. She felt the presence of what she believed to be angels, beings of light, moving around her, guiding her, offering love in a way that transcended anything she had ever experienced. There was no pain, no fear, only a sense of safety and serenity. But this peace was not the end. The light, which she recognized as God, conveyed to her that her journey was not over. She was to return. There was more for her to do. Although the thought of leaving this overwhelming peace was almost unbearable, Dr. Blackwood knew that she must go back, and so she was revived, against all odds. Her miraculous survival defied every expectation. Doctors and paramedics alike were baffled. How had she survived being underwater for so long without brain damage? The experience left Dr. Blackwood profoundly changed. But there was one part of her experience that she kept hidden, a secret she struggled with for years. As time went on, and the world began to change in ways she couldn't ignore, Dr. Blackwood felt a strong compulsion to share what she had seen. The year 2016 marked a turning point in American politics, and it was then that she could no longer keep her vision buried. She began to speak about it in public lectures and private interviews, revealing a hidden part of her experience, a vision of the future. In her vision, Dr. Blackwood once again found herself enveloped in that brilliant divine light. The same light that had comforted her in death now communicated with her, not through words, but through a direct transmission of knowledge. She saw a future filled with turmoil and division, a nation in crisis, streets filled with protesting crowds, families torn apart by disagreement, and a country on the brink of collapse. But amidst the chaos, one figure stood out, a leader unlike any other, emerging in the midst of the storm. Dr. Blackwood saw him as a powerful force, a disruptor, not of his own making, but sent by a higher power. This figure was not the kind of leader people expected. He was controversial, unpredictable, and deeply divisive. Yet there was something about him that set him apart. She sensed that he was meant to be a catalyst, a tool of change, someone who would challenge the established order, expose corruption, and bring uncomfortable truths to the surface. It wasn't until the unexpected election of Donald Trump that Dr. Blackwood began to recognize the figure she had seen in her vision. She felt a deep unease. This was not a message of endorsement, but a revelation of purpose. The leader she had seen, she realized, was a part of a larger, divine plan, an instrument of change, meant to shake the very foundations of American society. This disruption, she believed, was necessary. It would force the nation to confront its deepest issues, its divisions, its corruption, and its injustices. The coming years, she believed, would be a period of purification, a time when the American people would be tested, a moment where they would have to decide whether to continue down the path of Divis. But sharing this vision was not easy. Dr. Blackwood knew how polarizing such a message would be. The political landscape had grown so contentious, and she understood that her claims would be met with skepticism, anger, and backlash. But she believed she had been given this vision for a reason. It was her responsibility to share it, even if it meant F.A. She spoke openly about the message she had received, that the figure of the leader was not an accident, nor a coincidence, but a part of a higher plan. This was not about politics, she said, but about understanding that divine forces were at work, guiding events. The response to her words was swift and intense. So, her journey from life to death and back again had left her with a message that was both profound and unsettling. The story of Dr. Clara Blackwood serves as a haunting reminder that even in the darkest moments there may be a greater purpose unfolding, one that we may never fully understand until the hidden message of the divine vision, a woman's prophetic encounter. The story of Dr. Isabella Hartley is one that seems almost too surreal to grasp, yet it's a tale that challenges the boundaries of what we understand about life, death, and the forces shaping our world. Dr. Hartley, a distinguished trauma surgeon, had no reason to fabricate such a story. Yet her experience, one that began with a near-death encounter during a kayaking trip in South America, has lingered in her mind ever since, and led her to a prophetic vision she could no longer keep hidden. In the late 1990s, Dr. Hartley, an experienced kayaker, traveled with friends to the untamed rivers of Chile. What began as an adventure turned into a struggle for survival when, while navigating a particularly dangerous section of the river, her kayak was caught and trapped beneath the furious current. For over 20 minutes, she was submerged, unable to breathe, her body pinned to the rocks below the surface. Her friends fought to free her, but when they finally pulled her from the water, her body was unresponsive, cold, lifeless. According to all medical knowledge, she was dead. But in those final moments, Dr. Hartley found herself in a realm that defied all earthly logic. Instead of darkness, she found herself surrounded by a brilliant, radiant light. This light wasn't just illumination. It was a living presence, a warmth and peace so profound that it was beyond words. In this sacred space, Dr. Hartley was flooded with an overwhelming sense of understanding, a kind of knowing that transcended her earthly experiences. In this divine presence, she encountered beings of light, angels perhaps, whose silent comfort and guidance filled her heart with love and peace. There was no fear, no pain, just an indescribable sense of safety, as though she was cradled by the very essence of the universe. It was here, in this place, that she received the understanding that she was not yet meant to leave, that there was more for her to do on earth. And so, against all odds, Dr. Hartley was revived. Her miraculous survival, defying all medical logic, left her shaken and transformed. But while much of her book From Darkness to Light focused on the peace and profound beauty of that near-death experience, there was one part of her journey she had kept silent about for years, a secret vision that came to her during her encounter with the divine. It wasn't until the political chaos of 2016 that Dr. Hartley felt compelled to share the rest of what she had seen. She began to speak openly about a vision she had kept buried, a glimpse of the future, one that was both unsettling and profound. In this vision, Dr. Hartley once again found herself enveloped in the same radiant light, the presence of God. She was shown a future of turmoil and unrest, a nation divided, its people at war with one another. In this chaotic scene, she saw a leader rise, someone entirely unexpected. At first, she did not understand his role, but soon the purpose became clear. This figure was a disruptor, a force of change sent to upend the established order. He was a wrecking ball, a force that, while seemingly destructive, was clearing the way for something new, something that could not yet be seen. And this leader was not the kind of person anyone would have expected. He didn't fit the mold of a traditional politician, and his rise seemed, to Dr. Hartley, to be a cosmic twist of fate, a wild, chaotic shift that made no logical sense. Yet, the message she received was clear. God often works in mysterious ways, and this man's role was part of a divine plan beyond human understanding. His presence was not an accident. It was a necessary force meant to challenge the complacency of society and force people to confront uncomfortable truths. Dr. Hartley saw this leader as a tool for spiritual purification, a way to expose the corruption and divisions festering within the nation. She realized that the period of disruption he would bring was not about the leader himself, but about the collective journey of the people. A trial, a spiritual test. The nation would be asked to look into the mirror and confront who they truly were. Would they choose truth, justice, and integrity? Or would they continue down a path of division and deceit? The vision was not just about political upheaval. It was a spiritual awakening, a time when the nation would be forced to reckon with its soul. In this period of chaos, Dr. Hartley saw a refining fire, trials and tribulations that would purify and renew, not just on a political level, but on a deeply personal and spiritual one. As she shared her vision with the world, Dr. Hartley could sense the confusion and disbelief in people's reactions. Many could not understand why such an unexpected figure had risen to power. It felt almost like a cosmic joke, a twist of fate that defied conventional wisdom. Yet, in that confusion, Dr. Hartley found a deeper message. God's plan does not always align with human logic or expectations. The leader's unexpected nature was, in itself, a sign that there was something far greater at play. This was not a message of political allegiance or endorsement. It was a call for introspection, a reminder that divine plans often take forms that are uncomfortable or unfamiliar. The true test for the people, Dr. Hartley realized, was not whether they agreed with the political leader, but whether they could see the spiritual truth beneath the surface. Could they rise above their biases and preconceived notions and choose the higher path, even when it seemed counterintuitive or painful? In her vision, Dr. Hartley was shown that the coming years would be filled with trials, not just on the political stage, but in the hearts and minds of every individual. This was a time of spiritual growth, a time of choosing who they would become as a people. The vision was a warning, but also an invitation to awaken, to choose the path of righteousness, and to embrace truth, even when it meant confronting difficult truths about themselves and their society. The most profound part of Dr. Hartley's vision was the realization of God's ultimate sovereignty. Amidst the chaos, she understood that all of these events were leading toward a greater purpose, a spiritual awakening that would only be fully realized after the storm had passed. It was a time of purification, a chance for people to decide what kind of country and what kind of people they would be. For Dr. Hartley, the message was clear. This moment of disruption was not just a political test, but a spiritual one, a chance for the nation and for each individual to choose truth, integrity, and a higher moral standard in the face of confusion and uncertainty. A vision of divine purpose, the controversial revelation of Dr. Emily Foster. Dr. Emily Foster was an esteemed surgeon, a woman of science who had spent her entire career studying the intricacies of the human body and working to heal its physical wounds. But everything changed during a near-death experience she had while on a hiking expedition in the rugged mountains of Patagonia. One cold morning, after a sudden storm, Dr. Foster found herself lost in the wilderness, separated from her group. As the hours passed, the cold and exhaustion set in, and in a moment of weakness, she slipped and fell, striking her head on a jagged rock. When rescuers found her hours later, she was unconscious, her body unresponsive, and by all medical accounts, dead. But what happened next defied all logic and science. As Dr. Foster's life hung in the balance, she found herself enveloped in an otherworldly, radiant light. A light so warm and pure, it felt as if the very essence of the universe was wrapping her in its embrace. It was not just a glow, but a living presence, pulsing with love and wisdom. In this sacred place, she felt an overwhelming peace and an awareness that transcended all earthly understanding. There, in the presence of what she could only describe as God, Dr. Foster was shown a vision, a vivid, unsettling glimpse of the future. It was as though the veil between worlds had lifted, and she was seeing a higher, spiritual reality unfolding. But it wasn't just a peaceful vision of enlightenment. The images she witnessed were troubling, filled with turbulence and conflict, a nation on the brink of division. She saw crowds in the streets, battling one another, lost in the chaos of uncertainty. And then, amidst the turmoil, she saw a figure rise. This leader was not like any other, unpolished, unrefined, and entirely out of place in the political landscape. Dr. Foster felt a deep sense of confusion as she observed him. Who was this man? Why was he there? And yet, as the vision unfolded, the message became clear. This leader had been chosen by a power far greater than human understanding. For Dr. Foster, it wasn't about the individual leader. It wasn't about politics. It was about something much deeper, a divine plan that was unfolding, even in the midst of confusion and chaos. The leader she saw was a disruptor, someone who would shake the foundations of the nation and force its people to face uncomfortable truths. This figure, with all his contradictions, was a tool for a greater purpose, a necessary force of change to expose corruption and cleanse society. His rise was part of a spiritual purification process, a testing of the nation's moral and spiritual fabric. The vision wasn't a prophecy in the traditional sense, but a revelation of a deeper, cosmic narrative, one in which the divine often works in mysterious, unexpected ways. Dr. Foster understood that God's ways were not always aligned with human expectations. Just as in the Bible, where God chose the most unlikely individuals to fulfill his purposes, figures like Moses or King David. This leader, despite his flaws, was a modern-day parallel to those chosen in sacred history. But Dr. Foster's interpretation of the vision was not without its challenges. As an accomplished woman of science, she had always relied on logic and evidence to guide her work. Her near-death experience had fundamentally altered her understanding of reality, but it was still difficult to reconcile these spiritual insights with her rational, scientific worldview. She found herself caught between her faith and the skepticism that surrounded her. Dr. Foster began to share her vision publicly, believing that it was her responsibility to do so. As the political climate in the United States began to shift dramatically, she saw events unfolding that seemed eerily similar to the images she had witnessed. And in this context, she could no longer ignore the connection between the figure in her vision and the rise of Donald Trump. Her message was controversial, to say the least. Dr. Foster knew that her interpretation would be met with skepticism, criticism, and even outrage. The idea that someone as polarizing and controversial as Trump could be seen as part of a divine plan was bound to spark fierce debates. Yet Dr. Foster felt compelled to share her revelation, understanding that it was not about endorsing a political figure, but about revealing a higher spiritual purpose. For Dr. Foster, the leader she had seen was not an infallible figure or a holy savior, but a vessel, an instrument of change chosen to disrupt the status quo. His very unpredictability and the chaos surrounding his rise made him the perfect catalyst for the upheaval that she had seen in her vision. The divine purpose behind this disruption was not about making life easier, but about forcing the nation to confront its deepest issues that had long been buried beneath the surface. The vision, however, was not just a warning. It was a call for a deeper spiritual reckoning. Dr. Foster saw the coming years as a period of intense trial and purification, a time when the American people would be forced to look at their collective soul and decide whether they would choose the path of truth, justice, and righteousness, or continue to walk in the shadow of division and deception. As Dr. Foster began to speak more publicly about her vision, she found that reactions were mixed. Some people, particularly those with strong Christian faith, embraced her message as a sign of hope. They saw her vision as confirmation that God was actively at work in the world, using Trump to challenge the entrenched systems of corruption. For these believers, Dr. Foster's account was a powerful affirmation that the chaos and division they were witnessing were part of a larger divine plan, one that would ultimately lead to renewal and healing. However, not everyone shared that view. Critics, especially those skeptical of mixing politics with spirituality, questioned the authenticity of her vision. Some accused her of projecting her personal beliefs onto the images she had seen, suggesting that her interpretation was more a reflection of her own biases than a true spiritual revelation. The criticism was intense, and many of those who had once found solace in her original account of her near-death experience now felt uneasy about the political direction her story had taken. The backlash did not deter Dr. Foster. She knew that her message was difficult, even uncomfortable, but she believed it was her responsibility to share the full truth of what she had seen. Despite the controversy, she continued to speak out, sharing her vision of spiritual awakening, purification, and the greater divine purpose at play. For Dr. Foster, this was not just a story about politics. It was a call to the American people to look beyond the surface and see the deeper, spiritual narrative unfolding. In the midst of chaos, she believed there was a divine plan, one that would guide humanity toward a greater understanding of itself and a closer connection to the divine. Whether people accepted it or not, she knew that this message was part of her higher calling, to help others awaken to the larger forces at work in the world, and to trust that even in the darkest of times, a higher purpose was unfolding.